Based on the response of the Jupiter, Venus, and Dharmakaraka videos that I put up about 6-7 weeks ago, I wanted to add a few things based on all the questions I've gotten from viewers. So first of all, I want to explain a little bit more what you're actually looking at when you're looking at Jupiter, Venus, and the Dharmakaraka, as I mentioned in those videos. What you're analyzing is you're analyzing the spouse, the partner, as an active, productive force in the person's life. A person who's actively trying to make the relationship happen. A person who's an active partner in what you're trying to achieve together. And a person who's there for you, okay? Now, that doesn't mean you're going to get married or not, because there's lots of people out there who get married and have useless spouses who are not productive in their lives, who don't support them with what they're doing, who don't contribute their fair share. And that would, of course, be indicated by afflicted and weak Dharmakaraka, Jupiter, and Venus. Okay? So, you're not seeing if you're going to get married with this technique. What you're looking at is, you're seeing if you're going to find someone that's worth being married to more. Whether will that person be a fulfilling impact in your life? Will they be productive in your life? Will doing all the things that a relationship requires of you be worth what they do in your life to make your life richer, better, and more fulfilled? Okay? So you can also, it also happens lots of times, people meet really great people. You know, I've got clients who meet wonderful people, who meet great women or great men who are there for them, who make a difference in their lives, but these people never want to marry them. Okay, so the client doesn't want to get married for one reason or the other, even though they meet people that are really worth having as a marriage partner. So again, we're not looking at whether you're going to get married or not with this technique. We're looking at if your spouse or the partner you're with is going to give you your fair share of what you can realistically expect in a partnership. Or are you always meeting men or women who have a huge deficit, so where they can't be a great partner? Are you always meeting men who are addicted to substances? Are you always meeting men who don't have a good job and not making money? Are you always meeting men who are married? Things like that. Or if you're a man, are you always meeting women who are married? Are you always meeting women who don't have a life for themselves, who become a burden? Things like that. There's all these different ways you can have a person in your life that you love who's not contributing their fair share to making your life go forward. And that's what you're looking at when you're analyzing Jupiter, Venus, and the Dharmakaraka. Okay? There's other things we need to look at to determine if a person is going to get married. The most important one of those is something called the Upapada, which is a Gemini point in the chart that shows how much karmic responsibility you have in the world. And that essentially represents having a person in your life, because when you're married, you have huge karmic responsibility compared to a single person. Okay? You take on this whole extra responsibility of another person in your life. And then on top of that, potentially a family and children and grandchildren and in-laws. You know, the minute you get involved with someone, you get married, all of a sudden your responsibility is just magnified. Okay? So this Upapada lets us see if you're meant to get married, if you're going to get married, and if that marriage is going to last, or if something could fail it. Okay, so that's a big part of it. Then the other thing that's important to look at is the 7th house. And we have to look at the 7th house in the Rashi chart and in the Saptamsha chart. That 7th house is your partner as an active person in their life. Your partner is in the world doing something as an individual. That's the 7th house. Your partner might be doing great things as an individual but neglecting you. That happens too, right? Again, whether the partner is going to produce or not in your life is Jupiter, Venus, and the Dharmakaraka. But whether the person's making money and famous and, super creative, whatever, we have to analyze that from the 7th Bhava cusp, from the 7th cusp, or the 7th house, because that's them. It's the same way that your ascendant is you. So if we want to analyze the build, the height, that type of thing of your partner, we have to study the 7th house cusp. Okay, the same way that we would study the 1st house cusp with a logna to read about you. Okay, then we have to look at the 9th house too. And we have to look at that 9th house, particularly in the Navamsha. That shows your ability to believe in something greater than yourself, to believe in a marriage, to believe in any kind of ashram, whether the marriage ashram, the brahmacharya ashram, or the sannyasi ashram. And to commit to any of those ashrams, to commit to marriage, to commit to sannyas, to commit to in bettering yourself, you have to believe in doing that. You have to believe it worthwhile. And for that we have to look at the 9th bhava in the Navamsha. If that bhava is good, you believe in marriage. If it's bad, you don't believe in marriage. So when things start getting a little hard, you give up. And it happens a lot too. I've seen lots of charts of people who've got a great Jupiter or a great Venus, and they meet great members of the opposite sex who are capable, productive, can be an active force for good in their life. But then the person doesn't believe in marriage. So they don't get married anyway. Okay, so we also have to look at the 9th. Then finally, there's a neat little Jaimini technique that's really simple. Analyzing the Upapada, the 7th and 9th thoroughly is, a difficult task. It takes a little bit more work than just something you can just do after studying astrology a little bit. It takes a deeper knowledge of astrology. So I'm not going to be teaching that on YouTube. If you want to learn that stuff, you need to take my astrology videos course or my Jaimini Sutras course. But there is a really neat technique from Jaimini that lets us get a basic description of your spouse. Are they going to be a foreigner? Are they going to be heartbroken? Are they going to be someone born of your own country or race? Are they going to have injuries? Are they going to be older than you? Are they going to suffer sickness? Are they going to be sexy? Are they going to be attractive and someone who has a lot to offer you? Are they going to be charming? All those kind of things. Are they going to have a lot of skills and talents? All those kind of things we can tell with this neat little technique that I will be making a video on before long for YouTube and posting that on YouTube. But the Jupiter-Venus videos are really, really important because when it comes to your life, you have to make a decision, right? And you get a partner coming into your life, and you have to make a decision if that partner is something you want in your life. And so we need to analyze that Jupiter, the Venus, and the Darakaraka, as I talked about in those videos, so that we can see what the partner has to offer, what you can realistically expect in getting back from your partner as you make the decision of marriage. Okay? And it doesn't have to be perfect. You don't usually, most people don't get a partner that's there in every way for them that they want. Okay? And that's why there's almost always some afflictions to Jupiter, Venus, and the Darakaraka. Okay? Every once in a while you'll see a person who's got an amazing Jupiter and a great Darakaraka, and they have this partner that's just amazing. Okay? But that's not the normal situation. The normal situation is there's some lack happening. But usually there's enough stuff being produced, the partner's a productive enough, good enough force in their life that we can find it worth being married to that person anyway, even though they're not perfect in what they do for us. Okay? And then sometimes we get charts where the Darakaraka and the Jupiter and Venus are really in bad shape. And when that happens, it's like people just go through a run, one after the other, of people who are just not great for them in their relationships. They're just attracted to the wrong ones. Or consistently, women who are always bringing home men who just aren't worth being married, who are just not worthwhile men to marry. Or men who are always being drawn and attracted to women who are just really not worth being married. Okay, meaning they're just not good partnership material. And some people aren't. And when they're not, it's best to let them go be their own thing. And when in one's own chart we find afflictions to Jupiter, Venus, and the Darakaraka that cause one to always bring in people that are limited or not providing their fair share, then a person needs to take a hard look at their life and think about the effort they're making, is it worth what they're getting back? And then look at that in the context of your chart. If you feel like your relationship is 50-50 and you're half happy with your man and other half you want to kick him all the time, and you look at your Jupiter and your Dara Karaka and you see that it's kind of afflicted, you might go, well, geez, based on my chart, I'm lucky to have this guy. It's important to get realistic with what your chart's indicative of, because otherwise it's really easy to think, oh, my partner's not perfect and I want a perfect partner. Well, before you start thinking that way, check if your Jupiter and Venus and Dara Karaka are perfect or not. Otherwise, you might end up getting rid of a partner who was good enough, but not perfect. And then you never ever do find a perfect one, because it's just your Jupiter and Venus and Dara Karaka are not good enough. Okay? So I usually find that when people come in and get disappointed in the people and their relationships, so often they have an afflicted Jupiter, Venus, and Dara Karaka. Okay? It's just so common. Jupiter, of course, in a woman's chart, and Venus in a man's chart, and Dara Karaka in both. I find it all the time that they just have those planets afflicted, as I talked about in those videos. And so they're unhappy in their relationships because their partners are not doing what's expected, or their needs for what their partners have are so great. In that case, there's other factors that are still getting them involved in these relationships. They still have the karma, so to speak, the fate to be involved in relationships, just not with great people. And that may be your case. If that's your case, that doesn't mean you have a no marriage horoscope. It just means your partners will be a burden sometimes and not provide everything you want. So you have to look for the other good stuff. How much do you really need someone to love? How much do you really need someone to have sex with? How much do you really need someone to keep you warm at night? How much do you really need someone to, give you kids if you want kids? Because if you want kids, you need someone else to help you with that. And even if your Jupiter, Venus, and or Dara Karaka are afflicted, you still need that person, that spouse, if you want to have children. So you have to look at astrologically what your spouse can offer in accordance with those videos, and then what you want from the relationship, and are you getting that, instead of just going, oh, I want everything and I'm not getting it, so I'm kicking this person out. And that's something I find so often. In fact, I was emailing with someone the other day, and he told me the statistics for India divorce rate at something like 1.1, and US and Sweden were the highest at 54%. And it's really interesting, because the truth is, the mix of charts, it's not like the women born in India are having better Jupiters and better Dara Karakas, and the men in India are consistently having better Dara Karakas and better Venuses than Jupiter, than in the US and Sweden. They're about the same. Okay? It's a cultural thing. The difference is, in America, people expect everything from their partner and their relationship, and when there's something missing, they get upset right away. Okay? And they just immediately disrespect their partner and break up and go have another relationship. Okay? And that's not going to be shown by Jupiter, Venus, and the Dara Karaka being in bad shape. Why is it not going to be shown? Because this is a slow-moving technique. Okay? Meaning that Jupiter is going to have the same influences right now in America as it does in India. Right now, Jupiter's under the very same planetary influences. What is really different, though, is your 7th house cusp, your 9th house cusp, especially in the Navamsha chart, indicative of your beliefs in marriage. Your Upapada will be completely different. Those are fast-changing things that change throughout the day and are different even just 100 miles away. It's different. Okay, even 10 miles away, some of those things will be different in the Varga charts. So, as a result of all those smaller things changes, we get divorced more in America, where in India they stick together more. But Jupiter and Venuses are the same. It's not like they're happier with their spouse and what their spouse does for them. They just suffer through it. They figure this is good enough, it's fulfilling my purpose for my social responsibility, my children, and everything, even though it's not perfect. I'm not feeling totally loved, and like this person's all the way there for me. And so they just kind of stick with it. In America, the minute things get a little bit less than perfect, somebody's almost always complaining. And it's so bad, in fact, that a lot of people in America and Sweden, those high divorce rate countries, get divorced thinking they're going to do better. And 10 years later, they haven't done any better than their ex. And they're going, I wish I hadn't got divorced. I've literally had clients say that to me 10, 20 years later. I wish I hadn't got divorced. Now I'm 60 years old. I haven't found anyone better. And I'm trying to make a living off my retirement. And I can't even live a good quality life because I'm doing it all by myself. I don't have my spouse's finances to help come together. And they're wishing they'd stayed there. It was good enough. It wasn't perfect. Okay? In India, on the other hand, people often stay in relationships that really are bad for them, that they really should be out of. I've seen some horror stories of abuse in India. Like, I'm not going to get into it in this video, but I mean totally utter horror stories right out of novels of stuff that's happened to people I've met and clients I've talked to from India that happened to them in their relationships where they should have gotten divorced a week after marriage. But they don't get divorced until they got brain damage because they've been so badly abused. Literally. That's the kind of stuff I've seen in India. So culturally we have to achieve a medium. There is appropriate times to get divorced. Okay? There is times when it's right to get rid of Mr. Wrong, or right to get wrong of Mrs. Wrong, or right to get wrong of Mrs. Wrong. Okay? Although usually it's Mr. Wrong that needs to get booted. But sometimes it's the best thing is to get divorced. Okay? But in the Western cultures, lots of times people get divorced too easily, thinking it's going to be so easy to go out there and get everything they want. And then you look at your Jupiter and Venus, if they're not that good, you're just not going to do better than that. Okay? So you're better off lots of times working with what you have rather than to believe falsely that, oh, I could just go do it so much easier and better. Maybe you can, but it's good to get an idea of what your Jupiter and Venus and Dara-Karaka are doing before you make that leap. Okay? Because I tell you, I've seen so many times when people have made that leap and they just kept on falling. And they never landed again. Okay? So that takes a lot of accurate chart analysis to do, where you want to see the possibility by analyzing the Jupiter, Venus, and Dara-Karaka. And then you want to analyze the upcoming Dasha. Is the upcoming Dasha showing better stuff for relationships? Is it going to get better? You're going to meet a person that you're actually better off with or not? And that requires analyzing all the factors that influence the Upapada, the 7th and 9th, and your Jupiter, Venus, and Dara-Karaka, and analyzing those and getting a good idea of, is the relationship future getting better? And is it getting better with your current spouse, or are you leaving the current spouse, and then it gets better with the new one? Okay, and a good astrologer can determine all that. But it all starts with analyzing Jupiter, Venus, and Saturn to get an idea of the level of ability of the partners that you're going to attract. If it's a low level, you need to adjust your expectations. Okay, and be more critical, meaning, by critical I mean, examine a person more closely when you meet them and don't get involved until you know a little bit more about them. Because lots of times when Jupiter and Venus are in bad shape, you don't know there's something dramatically wrong with them. You don't know they're already married. You don't know they have a drug addiction problem. For 6 months, a year, 2 years down the road, when you're committed to them, you've had sex with them, maybe even you're pregnant, and then you find out they have this huge deficit in their lives that's going to impact your life too. Okay? All right. So, other things, some questions people had. Many people asked me, what if the Dara-Karaka and Jupiter are the same? What if the Dara-Karaka is Jupiter? Or what if the Dara-Karaka is Venus in a man's chart? What if the Dara-Karaka is the same as Jupiter or Venus? Well, in that case, if you're man and your Dara-Karaka is Venus, then everything depends on Venus. You don't get a second planet to give half the picture. So if Venus is bad, you're screwed. You don't have another planet to boost it and give you a good, useful woman. Okay? Same with Jupiter. If Jupiter is the Dara-Karaka and it's good, and it's Jupiter and it's good, well, great. You're really fortunate. Because that planet's carrying the weight of both of those responsibilities. So there's no difference. It's just that planet's twice as important because it's the only one doing it. Okay? A lot of people have asked, what if Jupiter is good, but my Dara-Karaka is bad if I'm a woman? Or a man might ask, what if Venus is good, but my Dara-Karaka is bad? So what if the Dara-Karaka is good or bad, and the other one's the opposite? Well, then you get like average. And by average, I mean you get some really good stuff. Say your Venus is good. Then you get really good Venus stuff in your life with your wife. But then say your Dharkaraka is bad. Whatever that Dharkaraka wants from the relationship, it's not getting any of it. But you're getting so much of the Venus, it ends up being worth it. So you got one great thing and one terrible thing. Okay? Or lots of times you'll get some medium afflictions to Venus and some medium afflictions to the Dharkaraka, so they're about average. So then you get a person who's got average Venus to give to you and average Dharkaraka to give to you. And you have an average relationship. That's slightly different than a great Venus and a terrible Dharkaraka, or a great Dharkaraka and a terrible Venus. In that case, you got one thing that's really you just love about that person that you wouldn't want to be without, and then one thing about that person that you're rolling your eyes over all the time going, my God, how did I get stuck with this? And in between those two, you're like, yeah, but it's still sort of worth it, okay? And of course, if you get both Dharkaraka or both Dharkar and Jupiter if you're a woman, or Venus if you're a man good, then you're really lucky. If both of those are good, then you've got stuff to brag about on both ends. That's very uncommon. Equally uncommon is having a terrible Jupiter or Venus. Again, Jupiter if you're a woman, Venus if you're a man, and a terrible Dharkaraka. At that point, your spouse is going to constantly disappoint you. You will constantly be disappointed in what your spouse can do for you or does. But you still may have the fate to get married anyway. So understand that. Do your best in accordance with what I talked about in the previous videos on this subject. Meaning, do your best behaviors, do your mantras, etc., etc. Live a life of Dharma if you're a man. Focus on your spiritual life if you're a woman. Learn to take care of yourself and your own happiness if you're a woman. Learn how to do greater things, take more responsibilities in your life if you're a man. Become a better person, and realize you just have the fate of a person who doesn't maybe have the level of capacity and ability that you have. And so you're going to have to kind of drag them up the hill a little bit this lifetime. Because if you have the fate to get married, you have the fate to get married. And it's so easy to blame things on your partner. Oh, my partner, I only wish they would do this. Well, if your Dharkaraka, Venus or Jupiter is bad and indicating that your partner is not going to do that, well then, if you get rid of your partner, how can you get one in that can do it? If your Jupiter, Venus, and Dharkaraka is saying, no, I'm never going to do it, I can't do it, then changing one and bringing another one in doesn't change anything. It's just a different face. But you still have the same planets in your chart. Okay? So you need to understand your limitations and get realistic with what your chart offers. And if it doesn't offer what you want, become the type of person that can possibly attract something better. But don't blame your spouse. Don't blame your partner for their inabilities or weaknesses and imperfections. They have those because of their fate, and that hurts them every day, those imperfections. They're hurting you in your life because of the imperfections in your chart, and that's why they were brought into your life. You couldn't have had the great Mr. Right, Mr. Perfect, or Miss Perfect unless your Jupiter and Venus and Dharkaraka are perfect. If they're not perfect, don't expect your spouse to be. So it could be a really harsh reality check when you look at this. But you want to live in accordance with your fate and always try to better yourself so that your fate can improve. But you also, by living in accordance with your fate, understanding where you're to blame, where your chart's to blame, and not the other person. Because the minute we start blaming everything on the other person, we're setting ourselves up for failure in the future. Because if we blame someone else's defects, and we go out and try to do something else again, we're going to once again attract a defective person. Okay? Just how it works. Okay? Now, one thing a lot of people who emailed me about on those videos, a lot of people were using conjunctions in the Vargas. No. Ignore the conjunctions in the Vargas and ignore the aspects in the Vargas. Use the aspects and conjunctions in the Vargas only. In the Rashi only. Don't use them in the divisional charts. So if Jupiter is conjunct the Sun in the Rashi chart, that's all you look at. If Jupiter is conjunct Saturn in the Saptamsha or the D7, ignore that Saturn. You just take the conjunction in the Rashi chart. Same for Venus and same for the Darakarka. Ignore the conjunctions in the Varga chart. Now those conjunctions in Varga charts work, but they work in a different way. They don't work directly on the planet. For instance, look at it this way. If you were standing next to me right here, I could put my hands around you, and we would have a close proximity with each other. We can talk to each other, and I can tell you things, and you can communicate with me, and we could work better if we're friends. Or if we're enemies, and we're this close, we'll be punching each other. That's what a conjunction in the Rashi's like. The planets are right there, okay? Now, a conjunction in a Varga chart, well, let's say I'm in Aries and you're in Aries, but in the birth chart, let's say I'm in Leo and you're in Sagittarius. That means I'm over here in space and you're way over there in space, but in the Varga chart, maybe we're both in Aries, okay? Well, that means I'm doing something to Aries, and I'm going to impact Aries a certain way. And you're doing something to Aries, even though you're way over there, and you're going to impact Aries a certain way. So we're both going to impact Aries, okay? And how Aries gets impact will affect me. So say you're Saturn and you're over there in the Rashi chart, but in the Varga chart you're in Aries, which is the same sign I'm in the Varga chart. Well then, so you're Saturn in the Varga chart and you're making Aries cold, okay? And say I'm Venus in the, I'm Venus in the Varga chart, and I'm making Aries relaxing and beautiful, okay? And a vacation, because Venus likes to make things feel like a vacation. Well, then maybe Aries becomes a cold vacation in the winter. In a cold vacation in the mountains, which is Aries. It's cold because it's Saturn, so it happens during the winter, but it's a beautiful resort. So Aries now can become a resort vacation. So say you've got your 12th cusp falling in Aries there, and those two planets there, so when the Dasha of Venus and Saturn comes up, you go on vacation to a cold area in the mountains, and it's a beautiful vacation, because they're both impacting Aries. But Saturn's not sitting on top of Venus astronomically. So it's not like Saturn's right here, freezing Venus. You understand the difference? So those conjunctions in Vargas have an impact they're both impacting the Rashi. And so that Rashi gets impacted simultaneously by both planets and creates a different flavor than if it was only impacted by one. But the astronomical conjunctions are the planets right next to each other, getting in each other's face to kiss if they're friends or to punch if they're enemies. Okay? So only use the conjunctions and also the aspects in the Rashi, not in the divisional charts. Okay. So those are the main things I've noticed people have had confusion about or incorrect expectations about. So I just wanted to clarify all that stuff so you can use those videos more advantageously. As I mentioned, I will be making a video before too long on determining the description of your spouse and some really basic, some very basic things about your spouse that are useful and interesting. If you want to learn how to predict the Upapada, which is, if you'll have a marriage or no marriage chart, like there's no chance in hell or you actually could get married, that's in my Jaimini Sutras audio courses. Then to judge the 7th and 9th house and to time when those 7th and 9th houses will give their good and bad effects. Again, 7th is partnership and sex. 9th is the committed marriage. For that, you want to watch my predictive videos at astrologyvideos.com. But to do that properly requires a lot of knowledge. It's like if you want to get serious about studying, that's what you want. But judging Jupiter and Venus, as I talked about, and judging this is something pretty simple that any layman type person who really wants to do a good job on their chart can do very effectively. Okay, thank you.